Shalom, brothers and sisters. This is Dr. William Snublin coming to you from With One Accord Ministries. And today we're going to do a teaching doing kind of a biblical examination of this transgender issue that is currently blazing through the media in our country. And, you know, of course, there has been a conventional Christian response to this, that it's not right, that it's perverse, and that you know, kind of goes without saying. But we want to dig a little bit deeper and look at some of the spiritual warfare issues behind this. Because a lot of people just, you know, people that are, for lack of a better word, normal, look at these kind of people and just scratch their heads and think, why on earth would a man want to be a woman? Like this Bruce Jenner, you know, or why would a woman want to be a man? I mean, it's like, you know, it just seems pretty bizarre. And of course, it needs to be said up front that these people represent a tiny, tiny fraction of the general population. I mean, less than 1%. So, you know, there aren't really any good figures on how many there are, and that doesn't matter. They're wrong, whether there's one of them or whether there's 1,000 of them, or whether there's 10,000 of them. In any event, what's driving this? Well, I would submit to you that it's being driven primarily by the demonic. People who are in this situation have been drawn into it, first of all, by the culture, which is, of course, thoroughly being run by the demonic, the media, the entertainment industry, and so on. But in addition, just the very fact that they themselves have been brought into a position where they're defying their creator. Whether they think of it or not, I mean, many of them don't maybe even believe there's a creator, but they say, you made me wrong. They're saying, I came out of the womb as a baby boy, but that was wrong. And, you know, you were wrong, you know. And that's the ultimate of presumption. You know, to speak to the creator of the universe, who are spinning galaxies and nebulae and everything around, and say, you screwed up, I should have been a girl. I mean, and yet that's what these people are doing, and it's the ultimate form of hubris. It's the ultimate form of rebellion. And of course, again, like I've quoted in earlier videos, rebellion, it says in 1 Samuel, is as a sin of witchcraft. And that's interesting because there's a heavy-duty occult component to this particular avocation, to this idea of a man becoming a woman or a woman becoming a man. And this goes all the way back to you know, really probably ancient Egypt or before that. And the whole idea of these gods and goddesses that are part of ancient Egypt being, having this, you know, androgynous gender fluidity kind of thing going on, you know, where, you know, just as one example, I mean, the fact that the men in Egypt, all, at least the rich, you know, nobility in Egypt, all the men wore makeup, just like the women did. They had eyeshadow, they had all the kind of stuff that women were wearing. And where did they get that idea? Well, it's interesting. It doesn't say this in the Bible, but in the book of Enoch, which is, of course, quoted by Jude, it says that these fallen angels, these watchers, taught women how to use makeup, among many other occult arts. And you might say, is makeup an occult art? Well, that's another talk for another day, which we're going to do, which will probably really curl your hair. But in the meantime, back to this. The point is that you've got a situation here where the culture is immersed in this, what nowadays they're calling gender fluidity, where men dress like women, women dress like men, and it's part of the mysticism of paganism. And you see this down through the years, down through the centuries, in various cultures around the world, where high priests and shamans and witch doctors, I mean, you know, whatever you want to call them, many of these people dress up as people of the opposite sex, whether it's a woman dressed as a man or whether it's a man dressed as a woman. Why is that? That's because all of these different religions have a god and a goddess. You know, all the way back to Nimrod and Semiramis, and you know, and the Anunnaki and all these different things in ancient, you know, even before the time of Egypt, gods and goddesses. It's the ancient prototype, the ancient lie. And so naturally they want to evoke in their hierophants, in their priesthood, if you want to call it that, the idea of both a god and a goddess. So you have this androgyny. And all the way down through the centuries, in the 19th century, some of you may have heard of the occult leader Eliphas Levi. And that wasn't his real name, by the way. He was not a Levite. His real name, he was a French Catholic priest named Alphonse Louis Constant. But he did a drawing of Baphomet, which is another name for the devil, Satan, whatever. And it's become very well known, and there's a graphic of it right now in the video, but you'll notice it's androgynous. It's a goat-headed being with the torso of a woman and the veiled genitalia of a man sitting cross-legged with his arms like this. And you know, you could spend a lot of time decoding that, but I'm not going to take the time. The point is that it is an occult deity of the most important order, and it's a hermaphrodite. And so they want to bring this through. Why is that? Because the fallen angels love this stuff, and they're running things. They're running Hollywood, they're running the government, they're running the media, and they want to promote this stuff for several reasons. One is because it opens the doors to the demonic. It's confusion, you know, and it is not of Yahweh. And when these people go through the surgeries and whatnot and the hormonal treatments, which many cases are paid for by the government, by our tax dollars, they end up miserable. They're not happy. Why? Because wickedness was never happiness. Rebellion against the Torah of Yahweh is never going to bring you joy or shalom or happiness. And so they go from therapist to drugs. Many of them, unfortunately, kill themselves. They commit suicide. And that's what the devil wants. He wants to come and steal, kill, and destroy the lives of people that could have otherwise led wonderful, productive lives, but they were fed deceit and falsehood by the media and by even the psychiatric industry. Because as many of you may know, it used to be that homosexuality back in the 50s and 60s was a mental illness. And then the homosexual lobby pressured the psychiatric community to remove that because it was a stigma. And then, you know, we still had for many, many years the idea that this idea of not being happy within your own body, within your own gender, was a mental illness. Now they've gotten rid of that too, I believe. So, you know, it's like all bets are off. Now, the other thing that is important to understand here is that in addition to these things being a doorway to the demonic, they're also, you know, they make you very appealing to fallen angels, because fallen angels are hermaphroditic. Although angels normally are male, we see that all through the scriptures, but they can manifest as women if they want to, you know, like seduce a man or whatever. And many people report having been either attacked or seduced or whatever by fallen angelic beings that are actually men, but they appear to be women for the sake of beguilement and seduction. Now, the other thing that's important to remember is that, again, Satan is into destruction. These fallen angels want to reduce the population. And that's what we're seeing. You know, it's interesting. These people, these transgender people, of course, cannot reproduce. They can adopt, but they can't reproduce. They're sterile. And, I mean, that just makes sense. And that's the devil, that's what he wants. He wants sterility. He wants lifelessness. That's why he's so big on abortion, which is his favorite thing in the whole universe, is abortion. So the problem is that you look around the world today, and it's interesting that if you actually run the statistics among liberals and leftists and people like that, and the only way you can do this is by going to states that are considered to be democratic or progressive states, the birth rates are down. They're very low. If you go to people that either identify as conservatives or as Christians, evangelicals, something like that, they have a higher birth rate because That is the fundamental, the first commandment of Yahweh is be fruitful and multiply. Right in the book of Bereshit in Genesis. That's the first thing he told Adam and Eve, is to be fruitful and to multiply. And these people are going against that. And then you go over to Europe, and of course Europe used to be Christian. I mean, between the efforts of Martin Luther and Calvin and John Knox and the Church of England and so on, it used to be a Christian nation, Christian nations. And of course, since the EU came in and all this liberal socialistic junk came into Europe, I mean, now in most European countries, the average birth rate is between 1.5 and 1.6. And that doesn't cut it, because if you have two people making a baby and they're only making one, well, obviously they're not making 1.6 babies, but that's a mathematical average. If they're not making 2 or more children per couple, they're going to die out. Because obviously, tragically, occasionally children die, infants die. And you've got to have more than 2 children per family, or the civilization is going to be wiped out, or it's going to be overrun by, Middle Eastern, migrants, which is that. It's a whole other conversation. The point is, this is what the fallen Malachim want. The fallen angels, they want this to have us to have infertility, for the planet to basically stop, especially, to stop breeding. And of course, these not fallen angels, these transgender people cannot breed. Now, there's one final component I want to get into here, and that is the idea of the scriptural basis for all this. Because we understand the conservatives and Christians all say this is not right, this is not of Yahweh, it's against the Bible. And of course it is. And let's go to where it actually speaks out on this. We go to Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 22, which is of course in the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. In verse 5 it says, "The woman shall not wear that which pertaineth to a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment. For all that do so are abomination unto Yahweh thy Elohim." Now, before I go further, I just want to make something clear. There's different ways people interpret this passage, and I just want to clarify the fact this doesn't pertain to the idea of a woman wearing slacks. As long as they're modest, as long as they're decent, that isn't what's referred to here, because a woman's slacks are not the same as a man's pants, or whatever you want to call them, or slacks. A woman's jeans are not cut the same way as a man's jeans. So that's not what's referring to it. It's about a woman putting on garments that specifically pertain to a man, or a man putting on garments that specifically pertain to a woman. Because actually, if you go back and you do a study on the way people dressed back in the days of Yahushua and even before that, most people are aware of the fact that men wore robes, which are essentially dresses. And women, as it happens, wore a kind of, for lack of a better word, sort of a pantaloon, a big baggy pants type of thing. So if you were going to be very literally historical, you would actually have men running around wearing robes, which of course is not being done, at least not in the Western world, or you would have women running around wearing, pantaloons. And that's what you don't want that. The point is, men are not supposed to try and pretend to be women. Women are not supposed to try to pretend to be men, because that is what the pagan cultures around Israel were doing. And we are to be set apart. We are to be different than the world. But now I want to make a final point here about this. I recently had a debate with a fellow on Facebook, and he was basically saying, we don't have to keep the Torah. We don't, and that's all done away with. And of course, that's a very common teaching among the conventional Christian church. And I said, well, then that means you have no law at all. And he says, well, no, because if it's in the New Testament, if one of the commandments of the Torah is repeated in the New Testament, then we have to keep it. And, the problem with that is that you go to Deuteronomy 22 here, it's not in the New Testament. There's many things that aren't repeated in the New Testament that are in the Torah. For example, tithing. And yet every pastor probably on earth wants his people to tithe, even though it's the word, you can look in a concordance, the word tithe never appears in the apostolic scriptures. It never appears. So what do you do with it? The fact of the matter is, this scripture in Deuteronomy and every other law, every other commandment applies to us today. If you don't say that, you fall into the mystery of iniquity, which we're warned about in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. You fall into the way of lawlessness and, iniquity, as it's called in the King James Bible. And that is very much evil, because Yahushua warned us about that. That's the way of perdition, frankly. And you don't want that, because it's a son of perdition who is perpetuating the mystery of iniquity, the mystery of lawlessness. So, when you, as a believer, want to use the Bible as the sword of the Spirit to fight against this heresy of transgender type teaching, realize the only place you can fight with is from the Torah, from Yahweh's own law. So take that into account. Pray about this. And pray for our nation, and please pray for our ministry. And if you liked this message, if you are encouraged by it, please subscribe, please share it with your friends, and please also pray about supporting our ministry. Thank you, friends. Be blessed, and shalom.